Yoso Bhagava Araham Samma Sambuddho. To the Blessed One, the Lord, who fully attained perfect enlightenment. Swakato yena bhagavata dhammo. To the teaching which he expounded so well. Supatipanno yasa bhagavato savaka sangho. And to the Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well. Tamayam bhagavantam sadamam sasangham. To these the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Imehi sakare hiyataraham aropitehi apipujayama. We render with offerings our rightful homage. Sadhu no bhante bhagava suchira parini bhutopi. It is well for us that the Blessed One, having attained liberation, Pachima Janata Nukampamanasa, still had compassion for later generations. Ime sakare dukatapanna karabote patikanhatu. May these simple offerings be accepted. Amha kambi garatam hitaya sukaya. For our long-lasting benefit and for the happiness it gives us. Araham Samma Sambuddho Bhagava. The Lord, the perfectly enlightened and blessed one, Buddham Bhagavantam Abhivademi. I render homage to the Buddha, the blessed one. And we bow, if we choose to. Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo. The teaching so completely explained by him. Dhammam Namasami. I bow to the Dhamma. Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho. The Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well. Sangham Namami. I bow to the Sangha. Handamayam Buddhasa Bhagavato Bhuvavadhanamakaram Karamase. Now let us pay preliminary homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. If we now go to page 128, we'll take the three refuges. So what we'll do is we'll go straight to the third paragraph, Buddham Saranam Gacchami. Buddham Saranam Gacchami, Dhammam Saranam Gacchami, Sangham Saranam Gacchami. To the Buddha, I go for refuge. To the Dhamma, I go for refuge. To the Sangha, I go for refuge. Dutiyampi Buddham Saranam Gacchami. Dutiyampi Dhammam Saranam Gacchami. Dutiyampi Sangham Saranam Gacchami. For the second time to the Buddha, I go for refuge. For the second time to the Dhamma, I go for refuge. For the second time to the Sangha, I go for refuge. Tatiyampi Buddham Saranam Gacchami. Tatiyampi Dhammam Saranam Gacchami. Tatiyampi Sangham Saranam Gacchami. For the third time to the Buddha, I go for refuge. For the third time to the Dhamma, I go for refuge. For the third time to the Sangha, I go for refuge. So we now go to the 5 precepts, which we'll chant in Pali and speak in English. Panatipata Vehrimani Sikhapadam Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking the life of any living creature. Adinadana Vehrimani Sikhapadam Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking that which is not given. Kame sume chachara verimani sikhapadam samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from sexual misconduct. Musavada verimani sikhapadam samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from lying. Sura Mereya Majja Pamadatana Verimani Sekhapadam Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from consuming intoxicating drink and drugs which lead to carelessness. Imani Pancha Sikavadani Silena Sugatim Yanti Silena Bhogasampada Silena Nibutim Yanti Tasma Siddham Visodaye. These are the 5 precepts. Virtue is the source of happiness. Virtue is a source of true wealth. Virtue is a source of peacefulness. Therefore, let virtue be purified. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Just bow a few times. I am chanting the 3 refuges and the 5 precepts. We're making something special of those words. We're actually voicing a determination, voicing a declaration, paying attention to the words in a different way than if they were just spoken or just repeated without much thought, just automatically. That's the purpose of ritual. It's to make something mundane special. It also creates an association, because generally speaking, having taken the refuges and the precepts in a collective process like we're in at the moment, the words, the chanting, are associated with a group activity, which is focusing our attention on a certain value system which respects life, is based on truth, and hopefully kindness as well, harmony, which all contribute to creating sort of a platform, if one can use that description, of being, which allows for a refinement refinement in terms of the thought processes that we might have, feeling processes, all geared towards paying attention, but being present and not just doing things automatically, which is, of course, what mindfulness essentially is all about. It's about being present in the moment. So having chanted those words of the 3 refuges and the 5 precepts, it also allows us to reflect on the meaning of those words. Because as we know, we all too easily drift into patterns and habits which are not always very skillful necessarily. So, although we may have heard the words and chanted them very, very many times, all those chants are history, but they leave a trace, of course. And so it activates a different quality of engagement in the process of doing it together. So we'll have some quiet time now. It's called meditation. The time-honored injunctions or teachings of the Buddha on meditation are encapsulated in the Satipatthana Sutta, which translates as the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Which start with observing the body. So we adjust our posture in whatever way is necessary to make sure that we're sitting comfortably. The posture has to be a sort of balance between being alert, present, but also relaxed, not too much tension, so we don't force ourselves into a rigid upright position. But we do make sure that the spine is straight, that the head is positioned above the spine in such a way that it doesn't put any pressure on the shoulders or on the neck. The head is actually quite heavy, so we balance it at the top of the spine, and we can imagine that we're suspended by a golden thread from the crown of our head up into the heavens above, which, if you sort of imagine it, will help the spine just straighten out a little bit more than it might otherwise. At the same time, we also ground ourselves on the cushion if we're sitting on a cushion, or the chair that we might be sitting on, so that we feel firmly planted on the ground whilst the head is uplifted by this golden thread. So there's this nice, perfect meditation posture. Sitting upright, relaxed, and yet fully present. Hands can be in the lap, one on top of the other, or holding one another, or they can be on the knees. And we notice the breath. As long as we're alive, we always have our breath to notice. So we don't have to change the breath. But what we can do is just take 3, possibly slightly deeper breaths than we would normally, and allow the out breath to be a little bit longer. So we exhale and pause for a second or two. Just do that 2 or 3 times. Noticing the nice sensation as the body relaxes and some of the tension of the day dissipates with the exhalation. Having done that a few times, we just allow the breath to find its own rhythm, its own pace. And all we do is just observe, witness our breathing. There's an art to meditating. And it's the art of just being, not interfering. So we become that temple of mindfulness, just observing what's going on as the body breathes. Observing the inflow of air through the nostrils, down the back of the throat, the windpipe, through the lung and heart region into the lungs. And as we allow this natural process, we may notice that our body at some point might just go through deeper relaxation as we ground ourselves, center ourselves. And this happens quite naturally, we just allow it to happen. All we're doing is creating space for this natural process to happen. So if our breathing is short and shallow, we notice our breathing is short and shallow. If we notice breath to be long and deep, we notice it as long as deep. And as we sit in silence, we also notice the silence. And in that silence, we notice our thoughts. Feelings, sensations that arise in the body. And we often find that the unfinished stuff of the day comes to mind. So if that does happen, we just notice that. And we notice the breathing in the background and come back to the breathing. As we sit quietly, we may notice there might be some tension in the body. We can start with the head. Notice whether we're frowning, if there's any tension in the skin on the forehead, temples, around the eyes. And if we do notice any tension, we can either just relax from within, as it were, with an inner smile, just allowing that tension to ease, dissipate. And we may even choose to frown and then relax the frown, just move the skin, tense the muscles a little bit around the mouth, around the eyes. Allowing them just to reorient and just relax as we settle into our sitting practice. Notice our shoulders, and arms and hands. Noticing any sensations that the skin might be feeling in terms of hand-to-hand contact or clothes on the skin. If we've been meditating for a few years, we'll find that we might notice how our belly is affected by the breath. As we breathe in into the lungs, the diaphragm presses down on the tummy, on the stomach. And we notice we're doing abdominal breathing, or diaphragmatic breathing as it's sometimes referred to. This is very healthy. It means that we're relaxed. Some of the tension that we can build up in our stomach muscles during the day are sort of massaged away just by the simple act of being relaxed when we breathe in, allowing the diaphragm to press down onto the tummy. This takes our attention lower, lowers our center of gravity, as it were. And you may find that every now and then the body will quite naturally and spontaneously take in a slightly deeper in-breath and just relax a little bit more deeply yet again on the exhalation. Enjoy it. Relax into it. Enjoy the silence. Don't mind the thoughts, they'll just come and go. You might even hear a sort of background white noise, sometimes referred to as the sound of silence. You can keep your attention on that as you breathe in and out. might find after a while the body needs to adjust or just settle into a slightly more comfortable position, feel free to do that. This is wonderful medicine for the mind, for the body. Breathing into the belly lowers the center of gravity, allows us to feel our weight on the cushion or the seat that we're sitting on, which then allows us to connect with the legs, upper leg, knees, shins, all the way down to the toes and the soles of the feet. So all this phenomena, the breathing, the sensations of sitting, are present because we notice them, we're paying attention. No effort involved. If the mind wanders off somewhere, when we notice it, we're already back home. Sometimes we find that the body makes involuntary little movements as we sit, spontaneous adjustments, releases of tension. see if you can detect that energetic buzz, sometimes referred to as the energy body. Sort of tingling, buzzing sensation. It's actually there all the time, but we more often than not don't notice it. So being mindful is being aware. It's knowing how it is in this moment. So we can acknowledge that. A very simple phrase by just saying to ourselves that right now, it's just like this. So we're perfectly attuned to how things are in this moment. That little phrase of right now is just like this can be spoken to oneself quietly or silently at any time. And it'll always be true. Simple acknowledgement and acceptance of this moment. Only this moment. Life as it is right now. So we can sort of surrender in acceptance of this moment. Only the moment. As it is right now. as we sit here, breathing in and breathing out. We can be more present to the present. As we let go of the thought streams that come up with their stories and narratives, we just breathe them out, let go of them, don't hold on to them. We're in a witnessing, observing mode, observing the phenomena as it arises, passes through consciousness and fades away. This Buddha or knowing is actually always present. Focus includes not only what we know, but that we know. So we observe this impermanent phenomena arising, passing through and ceasing. And we observe it from a position of ever-present knowing. So as we open our eyes slowly, take in our surroundings. Notice the multiplicity of things, the colors, the textures, the light. And we also notice the quality of presence that we're experiencing as we sit here, having just sat quietly and still for a while. Sometimes our sitting is not so comfortable, not so pleasant. Things come up. Memories come up, stories come up, issues come up, hurts experienced or hurts given come up. Because our awareness is like a searchlight, it just highlights things. And when we're not caught up in the busyness of doing, all sorts of loose ends of our life, our relationships can come to the surface. And sometimes they can be quite unpleasant, the hurts we've experienced or the hurts that we've given other people. So the encouragement is to trust this process. Because there's something quite magical about consciousness, about awareness. It actually acts as a catalyst, as a healing process. It brings things together. So there are times when meditation or just sitting quietly can be quite challenging. Much easier to flick a switch for the radio or television. But actually what we find, and you will find, is that just by having a time on a daily basis of just sitting quietly for 10, 15 minutes, half an hour, without forcing it excessively or being too self-indulgent at the other extremes, something gradually starts permeating our daily lives. We find there's a direct correlation between our sitting practice and how the day goes by. Evolution has geared us up to always be planning ahead, anticipating events before they actually happen. It's a way of important for survival. But together with that anticipation can often come a degree of tension, a sort of anticipatory anxiety. And this can sometimes happen in the morning when we sit and meditate. But actually, there may be a sort of quite unsettled, difficult to settle, difficult to relax. Well, just sit with that, sit with that. What you will find that sometimes an uncomfortable sitting in the morning, where there's a certain degree of anxiety about the day ahead, actually what you're doing is allowing that anxiety to flower in consciousness in the early hours before you've actually started your full day. And just by paying attention to it and being with it, it takes the edge off it, it dissipates the anxiety. And you might find, to your surprise, that the day actually will go much more smoothly, even though your meditation wasn't a particularly quote-unquote good one. We tend to value a good meditation as one that allows us to feel good. And that is a good meditation. But there's also that aspect to mindful meditation, of being aware that enables us to process uncomfortable feelings, allows us to adapt to them and accept them. And in that acceptance, there's a resolution, and a feeling which goes, a feeling better, which goes deeper than just having a nice quiet sit. So be prepared for a rocky up and down journey, especially when pursuing a deeper inquiry into deeper investigation into the experience of life. I'd like to, we have about 25 minutes to the end of the class, and very much welcome any questions or observations or pointers so that we can hear from each other rather than just having my voice. So if you'd like to suggest, mention, or raise a question, point that you'd like to share, please feel free to do so. You can hopefully unmute yourselves or raise a hand or put something in the chat if you want to, you prefer to do it anonymously. And do feel free to make suggestions about how we spend our time. Nice number of people who I'm sure are very reflective, very intelligent, very committed to this practice, and I'm sure have something to share and enrich the group process by. Is there too much talking? Would you prefer quieter sits with no talking at all, no guidance? Perhaps you could just share how you find. Oh, I hear Jude. Yes, is that Jude? Jude Freeman.
Thank you, Nick. Well, personally, I like the way you run the class, or the class as a run. And it never feels intrusive. It always feels very helpful. I think what you've just spoken about is incredibly practical and so true. The idea that, when you're quite agitated sometimes in a morning sit, conversely, the day pans out quite smoothly.
You found that to be the case?
I have found that, but I don't think I'd articulated it quite. I don't think I'd quite, seen, I don't think I'd quite put it into words, but rather than seeing it as a failure, actually it's almost slightly cathartic, isn't it?
It is indeed. I'm so pleased you agree with me.
I totally do. The thing I wanted to mention was actually slightly different. It was about the chanting. I've been thinking about the chanting and the collective nature of the chanting, particularly in these evenings. And I just wanted to mention something I'd read this week. I was reading something about it was actually about the English choral tradition. Mm-hmm. But the person writing the article, it was about Herbert Howells, but the person who'd written the article quoted St. Augustine as having said, apparently, or wrote, the person who sings prays twice. Which I thought was very lovely and gave me a lot of food for thought over several days. And I think it might even be praised 3 times when we do it collectively. So it multiplies, doesn't it, in its meaning.
How interesting. I really like that. I haven't heard that.
I hadn't either. The person who sings prays twice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. That's so true. I think it's because it's not sort of being done automatically. Yes, I'd like to think about that a bit more, but it's absolutely true. There is more power to it. It creates a set of associations, which I think after a while get embodied in the body, literally. Mm. As we start chanting, all the associations sort of kick in. It triggers more things. And we do know that, of course, that chanting or singing actually activates the whole brain, not just one hemisphere. So it's a much more, it integrates us more. And that's, of course, a nice way of learning. It's like learning by rote, by chanting. Things go deeper. They sort of get embedded. Yeah, very interesting. Thank you so much for that.
It might be something also about the fact it kind of is released into the atmosphere. It actually becomes, your prayer becomes something greater because it's more widespread. It's released. I don't know, but yeah, I thought it was lovely. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you. I see someone has put a question in the chat, I think. Chat. One question here, I'll just read it as it comes. Is it possible that a skillful action, e.g., telling an unpleasant truth, turns into an unskillful action because it will create much pain? So speak or be quiet. Thank you. Whew. Well, we never know. We have to put our neck on the block sometimes, or put our head above the parapet when saying something to someone which they might find difficult. I'd like to spend a session on a little formula, which is sort of 5 factors of right speech, which I'll just run through now because it's so true, so good. Basically, before speaking to somebody, the first thing to consider is it true? Now, of course, truth is relative, but in other words, do we feel that it's really true? Secondly, is it helpful to say what needs to be said? Yeah. So we may feel that it's true, but then we have to question ourselves, would it be helpful if I actually put this into words? The third factor is it timely? Is this the right moment? Is this a good time to say what I feel is true and will be helpful? The fourth one is there kindness in what is in the words that are spoken? Is it being said from a kinder disposition? This is really a phenomenal screen. It's like a filter. Because if it's said with anger or with hatred or with resentment, it will poison the words that are shared or the thought that's shared. And the fifth one is it's communicated politely, meaning skillfully, in a way that makes it easy to hear because of the way it's formulated. Those 5 factors are really tremendous guides and indicators to come to a position where one can say it with really the best of intentions. And if it's said with the best of intentions, then there's no bad karma, to use that expression. Yeah. It may not be received well, at which point one just apologizes. It may hurt, but sometimes being told something truthful does hurt, but it can be beneficial. So each situation will have its own context. And so that's an individual decision that you have to take. Otherwise, it can become too black and white, speak or be quiet. Very good question. But if it's put through this sort of questioning process, is it true? Is it helpful? Is this the right moment to say it? Is it said kindly? Is it said politely? If it passes those 5, then you're on a pretty good wicket. That's what I suggest. So thank you very much for that question. It's a really good one. There's another one here. Thank you, Nick. The amount of talking was just right this evening and not too intrusive. Good, I'm glad. Thanks for the feedback. Silence works best for me, but I love your contribution this evening. I like the music of your voice. Well, thank you so much. It's not often you get such nice things said. Then there's another one. Look up what Ajahn Chah says about right speech and balancing it with truth. Ajahn Ajahn Sumedho has given a talk on this, very instructive. Well, yes, Ajahn Chah said so many things about right speech, which is all true. I'm not sure which part that refers to, but absolutely, it's worth going to teachers such as Ajahn Chah, Ajahn Sumedho, to see what they say on the topic of right speech.
If I can just, it was Ajahn Sumedho when he was a very young monk. He saw a particular monk was really doing everything all wrong, and Ajahn Sumedho thought he was perfectly right in telling him all the things that he did wrong, and he spoke to him very forcefully and directly and truthfully. But the monk was so upset that he left. He left. Do you know that?
Yes, I know
that story. And Ajahn Chah said, you were right, but you were wrong. But you were wrong. So it's really, really, and Ajahn Sumedho said that he learned a huge lesson from to learn to, even if you're right, weigh it very carefully.
Absolutely, because one can get quite caught up in righteousness, a righteous sort of state of mind, that I know what's what, I know what's happening here, and I'm going to let you know that I know. And it's actually very, very damaging. Yes, that poor monk actually left the community. And Ajahn Chah, just to compliment, add to what you were saying, said that actually he hadn't found anywhere where he was accepted, this monk. He was very, very uncertain of himself. And Ajahn Chah had taken him into the monastery out of the goodness of his heart, because he knew that he had nowhere else to go. And Ajahn Sumedho felt terrible, absolutely terrible. But isn't that the truth? If we find that we've done something wrong and then it's pointed out to us, that burning sensation of shame, but also the determination to sort of not do it again and sort of feel the horror of it, and also and it does become a learning experience. And in a sense, life is doing this to us all of the time. You know, life is a teacher. All the experiences that we have are teaching us something. And it's for us to be good students and learn and draw the right conclusions and learn the right things from what happens to us in life. Yeah, thank you, Madeline. That's good to recount that story.
So I just wanted to say too, this holding on to fixed views is an important part of, and this is what Ajahn Sumedho was saying. He had a very clear view, and actually his view was reasonable and right. But it's not always right to hold on to those fixed views or even express them.
Yeah,
it's really, it's something that's one of the teachings that I find most difficult. I tend to say I'm right, and here not only that, I can point to the text and prove that I'm right. So it's really hard to let go of that. For me, I've had to learn to let go of that, really.
Yes. Well, Madeline, we'll be chanting the chant of loving kindness, which actually ends on that note about not holding to fixed views. So you're on the button.
Thank you.
Thank you. You know, sometimes in the conversations, such as the one we're having, there are periods of silence. Just observe. I find it very interesting to observe how we like to fill up that empty silence with a sense of obligation to say something. So the nice thing when one is with practicing Buddhists is that it's okay to be silent. We don't have to speak. Yeah. It just allows us that opportunity to sort of reflect inwards and just be, not only notice all the sensations we're experiencing, but just notice presence. Yeah. That's what's so awful about sort of cocktail party type social gatherings, where one sort of was forced into making conversation. And it's deemed to be rude if you just stand there or sit there quietly. I remember from a different tradition, I don't know if any of you are familiar with a book called Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramhansa Yogananda. He's a Hindu teacher. It's a lovely book, very devotional, but quite some extraordinary stories of the effects or the power that comes from meditation. Very lovely man. And his injunction, I think, that his teacher gave him was, for every hour of speech, you should have 3 hours of silence. That was his ratio. And in fact, a Hindu guru came to Amaravati a number of years ago. And I've forgotten his name. I can see his image in my mind, sort of beard, white beard, and looking just like a sort of Hindu yogi. And he doesn't speak at all, in constant silence, perpetual silence. So if you ask a question, if he does answer the question, he'll write down the answer, but he won't speak at all. So constantly silent. And he somehow, well, you must have devotees who look after him, take care of him, and attend to his needs. But it's an interesting thing to, if one lives on one's own, then one, of course, one can do it. But if one's accustomed to living in a household full of people talking and one participates in the household, it's really interesting to go into a sort of silent mode and perhaps either with the agreement or if not, then you have to go somewhere else. Just spend a day in complete silence. So,
to break the silence, can I say something?
Yes, please do.
You probably have already got this one before, but a number of people now, they ask me, well, with what is happening in Ukraine right now, where do Buddhists stand? What do you do when, they are bombing schools and so on? Can you say something?
Yeah, it's it's heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking. It's very interesting to observe the reactions that come up, seeing all that awful suffering. I think as a human being, one is touched on many levels. One is horrified by the suffering that one is witnessing, the terrible acts of cruelty, the death, mutilation of people, houses, homes, terrible use of force of one human being on another. And then together with that also comes a desire for there to be a resolution, one where the good people win. And of course, one then hears of all the support that the Ukrainians are getting from the West. And one thinks, yes, that's the right thing, they should be helped. But then one sort of sees that the help is not only just financial support, it's military support as well. And then one sees those pictures of those either tank battles or destroyed columns of tanks. And I find that on one level, sort of, wow. And then the sudden realization, of course, those tanks were driven by human beings, by young men, often in a situation which they didn't choose to be in. And there's a sense of sort of realization at some point when one goes really deeply into it, that it's madness. It's samsara at its extreme form. And there aren't any winners. At the same time, when I think of, and I know someone who is actually in Ukraine, has a family there, and I've been speaking to her several times a week. Her son is on the Eastern Front. Well, actually, he's in hospital at the moment, being quite seriously wounded. And they're fighting for their country. They're trying to protect themselves from an invasion. And who am I to morally say, don't fight, don't defend your territory? So one just sees this massive conflicting sort of values and perspectives. And it's just samsara, it's the world. And it's very, very sobering. And where does one find peace in a world which is so unstable, in conditions which are so unstable? So you ask, what would I say? Well, do what you feel is right, because I can't speak on your behalf. What would I do if I saw someone about to shoot people who are close to who I'm close to? Would I just stand there and raise my hands? I might, I don't know. I have absolutely no idea how I'd respond. Or would I try and prevent it happening? And if so, how far do I go in preventing it? Do I just go into a meditation posture? I have no idea. I don't know the answer. All I can say is, thank God that I'm not there, actually, and that I actually have conditions to reflect on and consider this. And then the other thing that comes to mind on a sort of probably even deeper level of all is what is actually happening right now. Well, our reality is where we are in the moment. And we can get so identified with what we're witnessing and experiencing that we get caught up in it. And we take up positions and views and opinions. And we hate the baddies and we love the goodies. And that's a normal human reaction. But even when that is happening, there is a knowing, there is a background knowing. And that background knowing actually is awakened awareness. And in that awakened awareness, there's the witnessing of the horror. There's the knowing that this is horror. And that knowing that this is the nature of conditions, of destruction, of arising, of destroying, of cessation. That's the nature of all of existence. Throughout the whole cosmos, there's the same cycle. We're just seeing a very intense one affecting human beings that we can identify with so easily. But this process is universal. And we can take it on board and respond to it with wisdom, knowing that this is the nature of phenomenal reality. This is the world. Arising, being, and ceasing. But there's also an immediate response of compassion, of love, of empathy. So actually the four Brahma Viharas immediately come into play. In certain contexts, it'll just be a kind response. In other contexts, it'll be one of empathy for the happiness for those who have survived. But there'll also be compassion for those who have lost either their limbs or their loved ones or their farm, their possessions, their animals, possibly their country. And what's the other Brahma Vihara? Equanimity. What is equanimity? Equanimity isn't indifference of just not caring. It's actually accepting that some things can't be changed, and there are some things that we can't influence. It's being equanimous, which is a factor of enlightenment. In other words, this is how it is. And there's something, well, it has to be said, there is an absolute the words difficult to find, which is beyond the coming and going, that primary reality, which we can tap into and have peace in, even, and know that this temporary existence on this planet is dependent on so many conditions. And the question then for us is, how are we individually using those conditions to wake up to the way things really are, which is basically a state of awakened being. That's our real nature. So it's incredibly thought-provoking and gives rise to deep reflection. But what's happening now has been going on for millennia. There's nothing new. Specific form may be different. They didn't have howitzers and drones 500 years ago, but boy, oh boy, they had another lot of weapons which were just as nasty to be on the receiving end of. So it's very sobering. It's a wake-up call to challenge our values, our assumptions, and hopefully it leads us to a deeper level of practice, deeper level of transformation that includes the heart and also wisdom and acceptance. And acceptance, I'm not talking about just a passive acceptance of it's okay. It's sort of, oh my gosh, acceptance, which really goes deep, deep, deep. And elicits a fully human, compassionate and wise response, depending on the circumstances one is in.
Thank you.
So it feels very inadequate, that answer, or what I've just...
It is.
But,
it is very valid. The best I can do normally is tell them intentions do matter. You know, you might find yourself in harrowing situations, and then how out of what you act matters. Never mind what in the end you will do. It matters for yourself as well. If you act out of hatred, you know, you might even have to shoot, but how you do it matters.
Yeah, yeah. We certainly can't be judgmental, but we can be discerning. And there's, I think, often a difference. What we do know is that anxiety, worry, and fear don't help or benefit anybody. I remember a lovely teaching by Thich Nhat Hanh on that very theme. If you are to feel anything, feel love, compassion, and support. Yeah. And empathy. Yeah. So if somebody close to us is ill or going through a difficult time, instead of worrying about them, send them love. Send them goodwill. Send them vibrations of good energy. May they be well, may they be happy. May they be at peace. That's good for them and it's good for us. It's a win-win response. So I've got another message, I think, just a chat to pop into that. Let's just see that briefly. Send metta and read John Donohue's poem for peace, which is in his book Benedictus. It is a deep prayer for peace and so moving. Well, thank you for that. That's Madeline again. Thank you for all your contributions, Madeline. That's great. So John, if you go into chat, everybody, you will see the spelling of John O'Donohue. And the name of his poem is For Peace. So I'm aware of time, try to keep to time. So what we'll do, I think, is we'll chant the Buddha's words on loving kindness, which seems very appropriate for this evening, which is on page 37. And do join in your abode, wherever that may be. Now let us chant the Buddha's words on loving kindness. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties, and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm, and wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove, wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another, nor despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness. One should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Although we're chanting it, those are the Buddha's words on loving kindness. That's one of the suttas. Absolutely beautiful, profound meditation and aspiration, something to aspire to. So we've run a little bit late. It's 8 minutes past 8. It's been lovely spending the evening with you all. I wish you all a restful evening for the rest of the night and week, and maybe see you next week. The next 2 weeks I'll be teaching and then or leading or being here. And then Ajahn Chah will be coming back for 2 more classes, which is wonderful. Wonderful teacher. And then Martin will be, and then we'll be alternating. So we have a full program to take us through to the month of July. So we'll do the closing chant. I believe it's page 16, I think. That's it. Good. Okay. And then we can say goodbye after the closing chant. Araham Samma Sambuddho Bhagava, the Lord, the perfectly enlightened and blessed one, Buddham Bhagavantam Abhivademi, I render homage to the Buddha, the blessed one. Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo, the teaching so completely explained by him. Dhammam Namasami, I bow to the Dhamma. Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho, the Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well. Sangham Namami, I bow to the Sangha. Right, well that closes the evening class. As I said, wish you all well and see you next week. So, goodbye.